That was a bit of playing over some chord changes that I just came up with a few minutes ago, and I thought now we could have a look at how that came together, what sounds I used on the guitar, how I got the sounds, how I put together that chord progression and the sounds for that, the sound design stuff element of that. I so hope you find this useful. And let's have a look.
I've got a bunch of parallel processing here, which we're going to look at. That includes parallel mangling, distortion processing, plus a bunch of different delay effects. So before I show you how all that works, I'm just going to play it again with the music, and then I'm going to solo just the guitar with all of the effects so you can just hear it more in detail. So let's start by just hearing a bit of it with the music. So you can hear there's a lot going on there. So let's break that down. I'm going to start with the original guitar sound as it was recorded. And just so you know, I'll sometimes be clicking the solo button here, and I might sometimes click this listen button. Cubase has this really great feature where you can do like a solo within a solo. So you've got like might solo something. I might have soloed a bunch of tracks, but I just want to hear this one track within that solo without kind of losing the whole solo setup I've got there. So that's what this is if I do use it, which I may do. So I'm going to start by just listening to this, and you can, just so you know what these things are, these, in case you don't know, these VUMT, they are a VU meter with a level, so they're just for level matching. So this is the guitar sound as it came in. It's going to have the reverb and delay on it, but and that is in here, which we'll look at later, but it's just the guitar without any other parallel processing. So you can hear it's kind of a fully formed guitar sound. It's got some overdrive and amp sound on it, and it came in recorded sounding like that. And that is what feeds all of the rest of it. Now, what did I do with that sound? The only thing I did with that was to add an amp sim to it, which is this one here. So this is a new one from Waves, and I really like this a lot. It's one of the best amp sims I've heard, and I try most of the ones that come out. I either try them or I'll listen to demos of them, because I'm always interested to see what can be done with that. But I have to be honest with you, I really don't like most of them. They all suffer from the same problem to my ears, which Waves have got around, and they're not the only one that have done this. I've heard the odd one, but very, very few of them. I don't know if it's just me, because I don't hear other people complaining about this, but it always jumps out a mile to me, is that they don't seem to get that 4 to 6K area right on most amp sims. It always sounds, compared to a real amp mic'd up, and I've spent a lot of time in studios listening to real amps mic'd up, and we've all listened to a million albums with real amps mic'd up. I know what they sound like, and what I always find is wrong about the amp sims, or at least the software ones, and there are some hardware ones which, like Axe Effects, which I'm not familiar with. I don't have one, but the sounds I hear coming out of those do sound really great, and I suspect that they've got it right. But with the software ones, they always seem to have too much. It's not that there's too much 4 to 6K going on, it's just the quality of that area doesn't sound real to me. It sounds kind of overly harsh and overly kind of hard-edged sounding. And I can't think of the words to describe it. It's kind of spiky, hard-edged, gritty in a kind of not real way. So, you can get a real amp sound that's got a lot of high frequencies because of the distortion that's happening. But nonetheless, it's always got either a smooth, kind of lush, creamy sound to those high end, or it's got a very aggressive sound, but the aggressiveness is kind of like really detailed, almost to the point of being kind of lush and smooth, even though it's super aggressive. And that's what I find they to my ears, haven't got right yet in almost all the amp sims. Now, there might be, occasionally I've heard one that seems to get that right, but almost always, even when they when they A-B it with the original, I can hear that difference. And, if people A-B it with an actual same amp mic'd up, that's the bit that always sounds different to me. It's the 4 to 6K area. And whenever I try them out, I always am like, I'm having to put a load of EQ on this to tame that area and get rid of it. But it's still missing. I wish it was there, only done right. And Waves have got it right. I mean, I do have the presence turned all the way down here, but nonetheless, that top end it sounds smooth and lush like a real amp sounds, even though there's a lot of it there. So I'm just going to start with this out, and then I'm going to bring it in. So you can hear that it's really changing the sound a lot, and it's very smooth, very lush, sweet sounding top end. It sounds to me like what I hear from a real guitar amp with a cab mic'd up in a studio, and it doesn't have any of that brittle kind of strange stuff going on in the 4 to 6K area. And I find that true of these amps, even when you drive them way into distortion, they still retain that nice sounding 4 to 6K area, even when they're totally overdriven. So I don't know what Waves did, but they really got it right, and it's fantastic. I really like this a lot for that reason. But also, and it's not the only amp sim that does this, but it really interacts with what you're playing. So it really interacts with the dynamics. The tonal changes it's making are changing depending on how hard you hit, how loud the signal is coming in, from note to note. And the changes it's creating are complex. It's not just sticking a thing on it, that's the same on every note. So yeah, I'm very impressed by this. It really sounds like the real thing. So anyway, that's on there. And then now I need to turn to the tricky bit, and I'm hoping that you'll find this useful and interesting in mixing in general, this bit I'm going to talk about here, because it's about signal flow and getting that right, which can be a really tricky thing to get right, and there's a few things to consider when you're doing this, and sometimes there's more than one way of creating the same signal chain, and in this case it was evolutionary. So I started with one idea, and then I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that, and I kind of invented it as I went along and ended up with what I wanted. But, I probably, if I was going to design it again from scratch now and I knew exactly what I wanted to do, I'd probably do it slightly different and make it just a little bit simpler, but not that different. And with my live rig, I often have similar setups to this with lots of parallel processing going on. And I tend to flowchart those out because I want to make it as lean as I can to get latency down as far as I can. But with this, it's something where, I just made it up as I was mixing, and it was a kind of creative process. So it could be maybe a tiny bit leaner, but it's generally pretty good, I think, from that perspective. And again, in terms of sound, it makes no difference. But what is important is that you understand and think through that signal chain effect. So these are the things to consider. what is your signal, your original sound going to be feeding? And what is it that is going to interact with any automation that you've got and level changes that you have? So just on the most basic side of that, you can see that on this channel here, I have got delay and reverb, and these are sends. Now the orange, which in Cubase means that they are post-fader send. In other words, if I turn this fader down, it's going to send proportionally less to these sends, to the delay and to the reverb, which is what I want. I don't want a situation where I turn this down and these don't turn down, because then I'll be getting too much reverb and delay proportionate to the guitar sound. So I want them to come down as I pull this down. That's obviously what happens when you have a post-fader send. But what if I don't want that? What if I don't want them to go down? For example, I'm sending to a distortion effect. As I am here, I'm sending to parallel processing, which has distortion effects and other effects where I want I want the level to be staying the same going into those. So if I bring the level down, if I did pre-fader sends to those, as this level comes down, if I was to automate this or just decide, oh, this is too loud in comparison to the rest, I want it down, it's going to change the send level to all of these, and it's going to ruin my sound immediately. I won't be getting the same amount of distortion. Everything's going to change. So for those, I'm going to want a pre-fader send, which is blue in Cubase. So it doesn't matter where I put this, it is going to send the same amount out. So that's really important for a lot of parallel processing, to think that through and think, okay, how am I going to do this? So in this situation, I had a further complication, and that was I wanted to hear this original sound, okay, with the amp sim on it, but nonetheless, I wanted to be able to control this separately. But I also wanted to be able to have a parallel version of that, which I could control separately, which sometimes affected the sends and sometimes didn't. Now, I didn't want that amp sim going out to that. So what I've done here is I have sent this track all the way over to my master, which everything sends to. So all of my parallel processing goes to this master bus. If I turn this off, everything goes off. So this guitar sound with the amp sim goes directly there. And I've sent it off to delay and reverb of its own. Delay and reverb also go off to here. This controls everything. Everything is ultimately sent to this one for the guitar and all its effects. So that means that I've got independent control of my guitar sound with the amp sim. But I didn't want that amp sim sound going off to my processing. I wanted the original guitar sound without the amp sim going off to the processing. It just, that amp sim was sounding great on the original guitar, but it wasn't right for the processing I was doing. It was too much going on there. So I had to find another way. So what I did was what I'm actually doing here is I've got the actual original guitar. This is the actual audio channel of the guitar here. That's turned down all the way, so you're not hearing that coming out anywhere, except it's sending over to the dry channel, this channel here, and it's sending over to this channel here. So I used sends, and I used pre-fader sends. And that's why I did it. It meant that I could turn this down, so I'm not going to hear any of the guitar sound without the amp sim on it. But I'm going to be able to send the original guitar over to all my effects and to the amp sim channel. So you can see it's going to what I call dry guitar here, which isn't really dry, it's the amp sim one. And then I've got guitar sub, which is this channel, which is an aux channel. Love that undo for the mixer they've got in Cubase. Aux channel here, which is my feed for all of my parallel processing. So that takes a little bit of thinking through to get that. And some pre-planning can be a good idea, but just even if you get it wrong because you change your mind in the middle and think, actually, I want to do this instead, you need to think through all of this stuff so you don't get a situation where you think, actually, I want to pull the level of this down, and it suddenly ruins your whole sound. You've got to get this signal flow figured out. So hopefully that helped in your thinking about, if you're doing a lot of parallel processing, how you need to kind of think through that signal flow. Okay, so dry sound or amp sim sound here, the original feed to both the amp sim and my parallel processing coming from here. It's turned down all the way, so I'm not hearing that, but it's sending off to these different channels. Now I've got that sound coming into this guitar sub, which is a aux channel. They call those groups in Cubase. I've made that uppercase because for me, it makes it easier for me to see what is an aux channel and what's an audio channel where I don't uppercase everything. And that's just a little tip for you. I find it really useful to be able to at a glance see, that's an audio channel. That is, and in fact, this isn't an audio channel. This should actually be uppercase because this is actually a group channel. So I actually got that wrong. But you get the idea. That way of doing things makes it, for me, really easy to instantly see what is what in my mix. And you can color code things as well as another way of doing it. I do both things. But anyway, I'm not going to go into the details of that. Just a little tip on speeding up your workflow in mixing. The faster things are, the more creative you can be, because you don't have to use your brain up thinking about stuff. You just know kind of intuitively without thinking it through, oh yeah, aux, and so forth. So first place it goes to reverb and delay because I wanted that amp sim to go reverb and delay. And in fact, I've already got it going reverb and delay, but no, what this is doing is this is getting me reverb and delay from the original. So I've got a bit of reverb and delay from the original sound because that's what's coming into here. And the original sound is also coming out of here. So I've got some of the original, some of the amp sim mixed together. And I've got delay and reverb from both. Now, what else have I got here? I have got sending off to a bunch of parallel processing. So let's have a look at these one at a time and have a listen to them. So I've got this one here. So let's listen to this one. So I am going to just solo this. So you can hear there's quite a lot, especially on the low notes. Some pretty crazy stuff going on in the low notes there, which is exactly what I was trying to get. I wanted that real kind of growly kind of thing going on in the low notes. What have I got on here? I've got trash, which is an extreme distortion effect, or it can be subtle as well, but I use it for extreme things. I will take this out and you can hear what, I'm going to actually put these in one at a time. Let's start with trash and you can just hear what that sounds like. So I've really crushed and squashed that guitar sound into a kind of, it's wave shaped, and then it's got an impulse response that it's going through that's kind of squashed it down into this kind of tight sound. And then next I've got Manipulator, which from Polyverse, which is it's a really interesting effect. I use this a lot for lots of different things. It does all kinds of stuff, and there's all sorts going on under the hood here, which, you know, I don't fully understand everything that's going on under the hood, but the stuff that is going on under the hood is really good. I think it's got some pitch following stuff in it, because it seems to, so the reason I return to this one over and over again is it seems to be able to change its modulation effects depending on how high or low the note is. And a lot of problems I have with modulation effects, like frequency modulation, amplitude modulation, ring modulation, all of those kind of modulation effects where you're doing a really fast modulation a lot of the time, is that you have a carrier signal and you've got your audio signal, and the two do not remain the same. And as your audio signal changes in pitch, it completely changes its sound as it interacts with that carrier signal. And to me, that's a problem. It means I get a completely inconsistent sound. Every different pitch of note is going to sound totally different, and I usually don't want that. I usually want some consistency there. And this seems to have some of that going on. I'm assuming it does, because although it does sound different on lower notes, for example, than higher note, it still maintains a lot of what it does, maintains a similar effect, or however your pitch does. It doesn't suddenly turn into something like utterly different when you play a higher note. So whatever they're doing, it may not be pitch tracking, but whatever it is, it's really great from that perspective of getting a sound which seems to kind of follow your original in an interesting way. I'm not going to bother going through what I've done with this, but I'll put it on. You can hear what the effect is. You hear what I mean? It seems to have it's got a lot of, like, it's got frequency modulation and stuff going on, but it seems to maintain that similar effect even when I'm playing very high notes, and it only really changes when I go down to the very low notes, and then suddenly it jumps into something different where kind of growly sound, which was nice, which I liked. But a whole rest of the range, it seems to maintain a similar texture, and it's very hard to find modulators that do that. So yeah, love this one for that reason. Okay, then I wanted to smooth it out a bit. It sounded fine, but it just needed kind of gelling and smoothing, and tape's good for that. So I put this on. It's going to be a subtle effect, but I'll put this on, you can hear. You hear what I mean? It makes it denser, and it pushes together so that some of the other frequencies the higher frequencies come out a little bit more, but they don't sound separate from the lower ones. It just kind of gels it into something a little bit more solid. And then bit of EQ to just shave off those high frequencies. There's a lot going on here for high frequency wise. When it plays, and low frequency wise, which I didn't want, so I just shaved that off. It doesn't make a huge difference listening to it on its own here, but in conjunction with everything else, I generally find when you're doing, especially with a lot of parallel processing, I don't do this to normal instruments unless there's a real problem. But when I'm creating artificial sounds, when I'm creating sound design sounds like this, where the whole thing is an invention, then I'm immediately thinking, is there something here I particularly want? And if there isn't, it's going to go. Because all that's going to happen is that's going to build up with the parallel processing. You're going to end up with mud or unexpected artifacts because things pile up and multiply. So I quite commonly in sound design, if there's anything there that I'm not hearing I particularly need or want, I'm going to probably pull it away, especially if there's a substantial amount of it there. Again, I wouldn't do this on a real instrument, but with sound design, I think it's a really good practice a lot of the time. Okay, so that's that one. Let's move over to this next one here. So again, another really different take on the similar idea. I've started with manipulator on this one. Again, I turn off everything and bring them in. And you can hear what this is doing. So it's doing a similar thing to the other one, a really different tone, but it's adding that growl to the low notes, and it's adding that kind of richer texture to all of the other notes. And then that feeds into this, which is just a wonderful kind of wave shaper distortion plugin, which unfortunately has been discontinued. And I didn't think they'd done I'm on Apple here, Apple Silicon, and I didn't think that they'd done an Apple Silicon version. I guess they did, because this is working on my M1, but they have now, the company's gone out of business, I think, unfortunately. But as long as this keeps working, and if it ever stops working, I'm probably going to start using something like, Meta plugin to run it anyway, because this is just a unique distortion plugin that I just love the sound of. It just does something that nothing else does, and it's got a huge range. You can drag this around, which I won't do, and get a huge range of different distortions. It's vast, really, the amount of distortions, and they all have a really nice sound to them. Anyway, I'm going to add this in so you can hear what this sounds like. So you can hear it sounds really kind of artificial sounding. It does not sound like an emulation of some kind of piece of hardware. It's just the whole point of this particular plugin. It's sound design distortion, which can be just really, really great for certain things. Okay, now what have I got next? I've got Decapitator. I have really no idea why I put this on there, because it's a really old plugin, but occasionally something in me just says, oh, I think this needs Decapitator. So, and I think I just wanted another coating of distortion on it that I thought might smooth it a little bit, even though this one, I've not tested this, but I've heard this anti-aliases, it sort of aliases really badly because it's an old plugin. But I didn't care, because I mean, it's total digital distortion anyway that I'm working with in this particular processing chain. But I had a feeling it would thicken it and smooth it a bit, so you can hear what this did. So you can hear, yeah, that's exactly what it does. It thickens it up and kind of gels it together by adding in more harmonics. And yeah, I honestly, aliasing is not a problem if you're working with kind of digital, artificial sounding distortion anyway, as far as I'm concerned. It isn't a problem unless it sounds like a problem. So I don't tend to use this one anymore on anything where I want, more of a kind of analog-y, hardware-y sound. But in something like this, it's a nice thickener. I know a lot of people do. A lot of mixers still use this on everything, on lots of things. But I found myself moving to one which to me sound more to my taste on most sources. But on this, it was great. And then here, I just again pulling away stuff that. I didn't want all that fizz on the top. On its own, it sounds fine. But in context of all the other ones, it was absolutely too much. And I was getting just this fizz was piling up. So I pulled it away. So next, what have we got? And this is also sending to the reverb and delay, which I didn't do with this one. It didn't seem to need it. Let's move over to this one now. So let's have a listen here. So there's a lot going on in this one. Obviously some pitch shifting, which we'll get to. So I will pull everything out of here and just have a listen to this pitch shifter, Little Altar Boy. It's an old one everybody knows. I really like this a lot. It reminds me of the kind of older pitch shifting that they had before they got really sophisticated about it, that had a really nice sound about it for guitar. I wouldn't use it on, it doesn't sound very like real, but it's got a nice, almost sounds a little bit, it sounds quite synthetic, synthy kind of, almost like the older Roland synthy kind of sounds in a way, which I like on some things. And if I just want more of that pure kind of sound design tone coming out, and I'm not looking for an accurately pitch shifted sound, but I want something a little bit smoothed over, I'll use this one. So just to hear this in and out. So that's that. Then this goes into Crush Station, which is Eventide distortion plugin, which is it's an interesting one. I find it's really an interesting one. It's quite unique sounding, and I find myself using it quite a bit. So I'm just going to bring this in and out. Start with it out. So you can hear it really coats that pitch shifted sound and adds an octave down to it. Actually, it's not an octave down. It looks like it's just a part of an octave down. Oh no, sorry, that's wrong. That's not how this works. This is an octave down. That's an octave up. And this is the amount of that octave down that you're hearing. So it is adding an octave down to it, but there's a little bit of the original coming through as well. And a bunch of distortion. So that's this one. And then I wanted even more sound design, crazy wave shaping kind of distortion. So I added tantrum again, a different setting here. So let's bring this out and then in. So you can hear it's really changing it even further from the original. You've got like what is essentially a synthesized sound at this point. It's been changed so much from the original, but it's completely based on the original. It's not tracked through MIDI or something, but it's wave shaped to the point where you've got something like absolutely different going on here. But all of that, and I wanted this smoothed it as well, so it was more consistent, more smooth and thicker. And then back into manipulator again. So again, using manipulator for something really different here. Not getting those growly things from this, but getting an even kind of smoother effect, something that sounded even, I wanted a kind of harder, glassier, smoother, but at the same time smoother sound, and I totally got that from this. Second instance of manipulator. So again, I wanted to take it even further, and to me, I'm heading here towards something that sounds a bit more like this probably won't make any sense to anybody but me. More like a kind of like a missile, a rocket, a missile sound of a missile kind of diving down towards something. I guess it all for me comes from the Jimi Hendrix's Woodstock version of the Star Spangled Banner, where he did those diving kind of missiles and explosions, and there was a sound he got, goodness knows how he created that sound, which this is, to me, I'm trying to head towards something like that. Obviously my own weird version of it, but nonetheless, that's what I'm hearing, is that kind of sound, heading towards that. And then there was too much top end, but I didn't want to kill it completely, so it's just a shelf filter here to just cut that a little bit. And again, that was done in context of everything else. I was hearing too much top end, and I traced it down to this. I didn't want to kill it completely, but just wanted to bring it down a bit. So that's that. So moving over now to this one. Now I wanted more weight and low end to this thing, to this sound. So what I did was I pitch shifted it down an octave, and then I just used an effect to bring out that low end. So it just becomes like a really low end that you just hear almost subliminally. So just to hear what this sounds like. So I just wanted that back behind it to give the thing a kind of more of a weight, almost as if, you know, it was playing through some massive speaker system or something. So what I did was I used Sound Shifter. This is a really old plugin from Waves, but every pitch shifting plugin sounds different. And this one, it's one of my favorites for sound design. It's just so smooth sounding, especially if you go down an octave with it. For down an octave things, it's just very smooth sounding. And it goes towards those, seems to pull out those pure low tones in a really nice way. So I use that. And then I didn't want all of the information up here. So I'm just going to pull out these so you can just hear that on its own, actually, that sound shifter. So that's what that's doing. And then I didn't want too much of the rest of the information. I just wanted to go for the lower fundamentals. So I just did a filtering here. Because I knew I just wanted those low fundamentals, and I didn't want all this information to then get further processed. So that's what this is, really preparing it for this one. So another Waves one, which is really good. They've got a couple of these different, they've got one called Submarine, which is also good for different things, and I tried them both, but this was the one that really did it. It's like a low-end synthesizing plugin, and it's just a great sounding one. It just really is good at, you know, I suspect it would be fantastic at like for explosions for film, you know, just really creating that sub-low end for things like that. And I find myself using it a lot when I want some low-end, almost subliminal information down there. So let's bring this out and then in. So you can hear it's not picking up on the higher notes, but that's okay. I just wanted those lower notes to have that extra weight. So I've pulled out the direct sound entirely and just added these extra, like harmonically, I guess, derived, bit like pitch shifting in a sense. I don't know if it actually is pitch shifting, but I think it's more around the idea of generating a harmonic below from the information it's getting, and which is why I prepared it with this, to get it as pure a signal as I could. So that does that, and then I brought in another EQ again, just I was getting too much sub. So I just pulled out some of that sub that I didn't need. Now I use this Kirchhoff pretty much exclusively now because I just find it is so quick and easy. For me, I find it, as great as FabFilter is, this does everything FabFilter does and a hell of a lot more. And what I really like about just the basic EQ is that it's so quick to get the slope. It's just there. You don't have to go to a pull-down menu and choose the slope you want. You can just move it, you know, until it sounds right. which is just really, for me, the way I work, it's just really, really useful to be able to do that. So I end up just, and it's the same with, if you create any other node in this, it's so quick and easy to manipulate it, with these things in a way that I, just not seen in any other EQ, just how quick and easy it is to do. And then, of course, you've got the whole very deep dynamic EQ thing here that just goes way past FabFilter. I'm not putting FabFilter down. It's a fantastic plugin, but this just does take it to a whole other level when it comes to the dynamic processing. So yeah, this is just such an amazing plugin that I never find a situation where it can't do what I need to do when it comes to kind of surgical EQ stuff. Okay, so that's that. Now, finally, we have this one. So let's have a listen to this. And here I just wanted a really good overdriven heavy guitar sound. And I used this plugin Cyberdrive, which is a new one from United Plugins, JMC, which JMC do, all of their plugins are really great. They do an amazing reverb, which is one of my favorite reverbs, called Hyperverb, something like that. What is it called now? I just should find that out because I use it a lot, but I'm never any good at remembering names of things. So I always forget, even if I use it all the time. What is it called here? Yeah, Hyperspace, that's it. That's a great reverb. It's one of my all-time favorite reverbs. And it's so flexible, great for sound design as well as natural sounding reverbs. But this is a distortion by JMC, and it's fantastic distortion. You get an enormous range of different distortion types, wave shaping, all kinds of stuff, things I've not heard from any other distortion. This is what I always find lacking in kind of sound design distortion plugins, is that they don't give you enough variation. And this gives you so many, and some of these are really unusual and different, and that's always kind of what I'm looking for, something that can take a sound to somewhere really new and different. And this really, it excels at that. So that's fantastic. Plus it's got a lot of really great controls. I'm not going to go over this in detail, but you've got a huge amount of variation. This control thing in particular changes what each algorithm does significantly depending on where you change it. So this is a massive palette of sounds, and then you've got serial processing of 3 of them, plus feedback. I mean, wow, plus a whole bunch of other processing. It's great. And what trumps everything, the most important thing of all of it is it sounds great. It doesn't have a lot of, again, one of the things that a lot of I find distortion plugins have is the same kind of problems that the amp sims have. I'm not saying it's aliasing, because I don't necessarily see loads of aliasing happening in Plugin Doctor, but something is going wrong to my ears with a lot of them. It's exactly the same thing you get with amp sims, where that 4 to 6K range is just really too hard, too harsh. It just hurts the ears. Whereas you can get, from an actual hardware distortion pedal or an actual hardware amp that's mic'd up, even if you really crank that 4 to 6K area of distortion, it still sounds really nice sounding. Smooth and nice, even if it's aggressive. And that's what to my ear, most distortion plugins do get right, and it's what this one does get right. Even the really extreme harsh sounding ones still don't sound like they're hurting my ears in a bad way. So anyway, have a listen to this one without, and then with it in. You hear what I mean? Even on those like high notes that would just could split your head if you had another distortion on it, it just sounds yeah, nice. So, yeah, big thumbs up to JMC for getting this really right. They seem to get everything they do really right, which is great from my perspective because I love using their plugins. And then I did shave off the top here because I was, again, in the mix. It was too much, so just... But, you know, another distortion plugin, I would find a lot of the other ones, even if I shaved the top off, it wouldn't be enough. It would still be killing my ears. It's some kind of resonance that goes on in them, I guess, maybe. I'm not quite sure what it is. Maybe it's resonance. Maybe if I put like 3 instances of soothe on there, it would fix it. But then you probably would have killed the sound. So, because believe me, I've tried soothe and it helps a little bit, but it doesn't really solve the problem. But with this one, you know, I just needed to shave a bit of the top off, but you still, you know, it didn't have any of those problems even without this. But in the mix, it needed a bit less top end going on. So that's that. Now, what else have we got? We have got some delay effects. So let's have a listen to those. Let's have a listen to the main reverb I've got here. Which is Seventh Heaven, which is just an M7 emulation. It's impulse responses from M7. Sounds amazing on everything. I've covered that in other videos. Then we've got this delay here, recirculate. Great sounding delay. I've done a review of this one, which I'm not sure if I've put up yet. If I haven't, I'm going to put it up soon. I may already have done it. It just sounds great, and it's got a huge range of different variability on it. And those two together in a plugin, you know, is not that common in my view. Something that sounds as good as any of the kind of nice analog emulations, but also gives you vast amounts of control. Yeah, there are some others, but this is just a great one. It's so easy to work with too. So when you've got that as the kind of my main kind of delay, then I've got a throw delay that I just use occasionally. So it basically occasionally comes in on a few notes, and it's tape echoes, which another one of my favorite delay plugins. It sounds just like tape to me. A really lush kind of tape, and I've cranked up the dirt to give it a kind of warbly, extra warbly, but it only comes in a couple of times. It's not worth worrying about this one. It doesn't have much variability about it, like say this one does, but it nonetheless, it just has its own really great sound to it, so I use that a lot. Finally, I have this delay, which is, I call it serpent delay because it kind of swoops around and it reminds me of a kind of swirling serpent or dragon or something. Let's have a listen to this one. So I've used this one a lot on various albums of mine, and it's still a favorite that I bring back and use. So this was not normally what I use on this delay, but I needed to filter because everything was sending into this. So, well, not everything, but a number of things were filtering into this, like this one here, that had quite a bit of top end going on it, and I was finding that there was too much top end coming into it. So I pulled that away, and too much low end as well. I just wanted that kind of mid-range area to be feeding it. And that's what that's about. This Scion, which is a really great effect from Eventide, but I'm just using it to shave off the transients so that you're just getting, I didn't want, you know, when you have a delay, it's very easy for the percussive aspect of the guitar to become dominant in the delay sound, and you just get this kind of percussive repeating thing going on. I really didn't want that. I wanted it to be kind of a smooth after image of the sound. So I pulled off the entire kind of attack phase of the sound. So just let's hear what that's like without and with. And then I used this delay, which I don't find myself using very often now, but it's one I was using a lot when I came up with the sound originally a few years ago, and so I just recalled the preset, and it had all of these effects in it, of course, in all saved and remembered. So it is a great sounding delay. I find it quite hard to control the thing, though. It's got a lot of controls which are hard to figure out exactly what they're doing to the sound, and it's hard to kind of hone in exactly on what you want, which is why I end up going for some of these more kind of modern designs, like the Eventide one. Not Eventide, sorry. Equivocate Audio, let me just find it here. Where have we gone here? Recirculate, Newfangled Audio, sorry. See how bad I am at remembering names? I cannot remember names. I can't remember people's names either. I just have a problem with names. Newfangled Audio, Recirculate. See, I end up using ones like this because it's so easy to control everything and see exactly and know exactly what's happening. And it sounds great too. Whereas this one, it sounds great, undoubtedly. Love the sound of it. But it's pretty hard I find, to get predictable, controllable effects out of it. And it has a lot of weird, quirky behavior with the way things particularly move to the left and the right and stuff in various, getting things to sit in the stereo image. I find it's tricky, but it's got a ducking feature which works really well, and it's easy to use and easy to work, and that is coming into play here. So just to bring this in and out. So you can hear the ducking is going on here, and this is ducking from the signal that's feeding it. So it's not sidechained or something. It's just the original signal. When that's present, it's pulling back on the output, and when that stops and there's a gap in the playing, then it comes up, which is what I wanted. See if there's anything else. Mix is 100%. So because this is just the delay, I didn't need the original sound. And then we've got a pitch shift, little alter boy again, because I wanted that kind of artificially sound to it. So again, it's kind of like that. It's kind of a smooth kind of, smeared kind of pitch shifting sound, which I really like the sound of for things like this. And finally, I've got a high pass here, a low pass, because there was too much high-end information. So that pitch shifting was too much, it was too high, and I just didn't need so much of it. So So that shifting around the speakers is just happening because of the way I've set this up. I've got a quarter note in the left speaker and a half note in the right speaker. And there's a bit of offset here so they're not completely matching up. Width at 150%. Yeah, so, and I've got a bit of flutter and wow to kind of give it a little bit of kind of warble as it moves back and forth. Yeah, so, and there's also some strange kind of balance feedback stuff here, which is always, this is the bit that I find particularly hard to kind of control, and this bit here, but I fiddled with it until I got what I wanted. Nice effect, I think, and so there are some really great kind of unique effects that can come out of this delay. So that's that. So let's see again what this sounds like. Bringing these things in one at a time. I'm going to have the music. No, I'll start without the music, and then I'm going to start just bringing these in one at a time. So let's just see if I can do this. Pull these. Oops, no, I don't want to do that. Pull these out and just bring them in one at a time so you can see how this sound builds up. So I start with, hopefully what I should have is just the dry guitar, I mean with the amp sim guitar. So you can hear how that kind of wild shifting, pitch shifted delay, it stays back behind it until there's a gap and then it comes to the foreground. If it was there the whole time, it would just be swamping it too much. Okay, so now just a little play again with it in context. So I hope you found that interesting and maybe useful in your own mixing if you're doing sound design or you're doing a lot of parallel processing. If you did, do give the video a like. Just press that like button, and the subscribe button is really helpful if you can just click on that. And if you can click on the thanks button, that's also really, really helpful to keeping the channel going, and really appreciate it, and hope to see you next time.